What's going on, everyone? So with the new rework to how healing works, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at how it was in the previous patch to what it is now. So before we start this video, I'd like to say that I'm only going over healing alone. So I won't be going over how the new items affect healing compared to last season, and I'm also not going to take into account the new 80% anti-heal cap, because by default that makes every healer better. So with that out the way, let's take a quick recap of the important part of the new update. So with the new patch, they removed the brawling effect, which removes the 40% anti-heal when out of combat. They also removed the power scaling involved with healing, to where now it's just flat healing. And not only that, but they also reduced ability and lifesteal healing by 30%, which is a lot when pairing it together with the removal of power scaling. So my main goal with this video is to see how much does this affect healing, especially when looking at the out of combat healing removal. Well, let's take a look at one of the main healing gods in Smite, Aphrodite.
Don't give in.
And as you saw, the amount of healing that Aphro was doing from last patch with the power scaling is a lot more than she does now with the new patch. And the out of combat healing compared to the new patch is roughly the same. And with Aphro having the capability of going hybrid before this patch, this means that she should be able to go full tank and heal well this patch. Another thing that I need to point out is the changes to Aphro and Hell. These gods recently have been built like tank/bruisers, and so now these gods can go full tank and not get punished by not building power for healing since they got rid of it. And not only that, the buffs they gave Hell, and specifically Aphro, incentivize them to build them tankier as it synergizes even better, and I haven't even started on the healing items you can add to make it even more oppressive. So expect to see these gods a lot more frequently in Joust, and you already know I'm banning them more often. So with that being said, let's test out a fairly tanky build. And the healing is pretty similar when comparing it to the in-combat healing from last patch. But when comparing it to the out-of-combat healing, she heals way more, meaning that you heal the same even when not in combat, which is a pretty significant buff to tank Aphro even without talking about her buffs to her kit. And also, you can hypothetically go full tank Aphro and still do the same amount of healing, so that's a plus 2. And the same can be said with Hell, where she gets way more healing with power scaling when going full damage than compared without power scaling now. However, Hell is different than Aphro, where she usually is built damage oriented, so although you can build her full tank and her healing will be better than last patch, it's not really in her kit to go full tank, but we will have to see. Additionally, she can go hybrid building items like Breastplate Regrowth, Lotus Sickle, and Genji's Guard for example, and even with these items, she's either healing more in combat or healing roughly around the same amount out of combat when compared to this patch now. So in terms of Hell, it's more of a nerf than a buff for her. And then in terms of mages that pretty much go full damage and heal, it seems to be a nerf overall to them.
I got you.
So in terms of in combat, similar to the others, Chang'e does a lot of healing in combat, but when comparing it to this patch, it does less healing even when comparing it to out of combat healing. So it seems like power based gods like Rama and Chang'e will be healing a lot less than previous patch. Quickly before moving on to Lifesteal, let's take a look at some tank class gods and see the overall difference. Let's use Yemoja, as she is a good example of a healing tank. With tanks though, it seems that with the removal of power scaling, that they're still going to be healing for less when comparing it to in-combat healing. But when comparing it to out-of-combat healing, they're doing a little bit more. So really this is only a slight buff to gods that don't build any power, like Yemoja and maybe Sylvanas if I'm being charitable. So overall, it seems that hybrid gods are getting nerfed outside of a couple mages that can build tanky, and also squishy gods going full damage, it seems that they're getting nerfed too, and then pure tank gods that also heal are getting a slight buff to their consistent healing. Moving on to Lifesteal, it seems to follow suit that it's also getting nerfed similar to ability based healing. Also, with the Lifesteal cap being nerfed to 40% for magical characters and 50% for physical characters, it makes Lifesteal inherently worse. Now let's look at the magical Lifesteal from last patch and then compare it to this patch's Lifesteal. And clearly, the similarity here is that the amount of healing you get is basically the same, if not worse, from last patch's out of combat healing, where the in-combat healing outshines everything else. However, I think Hybrid Hades is probably better now, seeing as they increased his base healing. And this can apply to most of every other god that has magical lifesteal, as they can build hybrid too, but Hades seems to be one of those exceptions to that. Also, I don't show it, but lifesteal healing from gods like Freya, Sol, or Oleron for example also suffer badly from lifesteal now too, so overall it's still a big nerf. And then finally, let's take a look at hunters now. So now when comparing it to out of combat healing from last patch, it's doing roughly around the same per auto, and this is due to the power they gave to Aussie and a few other physical lifesteal items. But when comparing it to in combat, it's still significantly less. So overall it's worse, but more consistent for lifestealing. So the final verdict on healing is pretty obvious, and that is, healing is worse for most of every god. Power-based gods and hybrid-based gods do less healing when comparing it to in combat healing by a mile. And even when comparing it to the out of combat healing from last patch, they're similar in the amount of healing you get. But gods building pure tank have a slight increase in their healing when compared to the out of combat healing. With all that being said though, healing is going to be more consistent across the board because of the removal of the brawling system, as well as the various amounts of other buffs everywhere else that could counterbalance this change to healing. Which brings up an important question. Even though healing is nerfed from last patch, will the new items, power buffs, and cooldown reductions that Hi-Rez gave to most gods counterbalance it? What do you guys think? Any questions or comments are appreciated, and let me know if you have any video suggestions. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching.